Work your crochet argyle color pooling projects in the round using this easy tip. I'm at the end of my starting row, so this is my first row of my color pooling project. You can see I've done my foundation chain and then I've worked back across row 1. And if you're not familiar with color pooling at all, then I recommend checking out Glamour for You's video on it. She makes it really simple and easy, and if you can understand the concept behind it, it becomes really easy. But to make the most out of this tip, it would be best if you did understand the concept behind that. So if you've never color pooled before, be sure to head over and check that out. And then all we're going to do is at the end of this first row, we're going to join our project in the round, just as if we were working an in the round project. So normally we would do that at the end of our starting chain, but we're doing it at the end of row 1. And all we're doing is slip stitching our first and last stitches together. So remember that your first stitch is actually a series of 3 chains, since we're working moss stitch, and we're working into those chains by just slip stitching that together. Now, normally when working a moss stitch project, you would chain 2 and then turn your work. But because we are working in the round, that slip stitch counts as our first chain. So we're simply going to chain 1 more, and then we are going to go ahead and turn our work despite the fact that we're working in the round. This will keep our pooling lining up, doing that slip at the end of each round and then a chain 1. And then you can skip the first stitch, work into the first chain 1 space, just like you normally would with a moss stitch project. Go ahead and work around to the end of this round, and I'll show you that slip stitch again at the end of round 1. I've just completed my last round 1 stitch, and I'm ready to go ahead and slip stitch into my first stitch again. So you have to remember that we're always doing a skip a stitch and then our single crochet stitch at the beginning of the row. So the stitch that you're slipping into is actually the stitch that you previously just chained and then you skipped a stitch. So we're working into that chain space and we're just slip stitching. Oops, almost did a single crochet. We're just slip stitching into that chain space. And then we are chaining 1, turning our work, and working back across. And remember, it does take a few rows before you start to see the color pooling come to life. You can also check out my tips and tricks for keeping a good tension on your project if you feel like you have a hard time with the color pooling and keeping a good tension. And once you work past a few more rounds, your project's going to be looking something like this. And you can see this is my seam right here. Barely visible, and because of the point I started, where I had the color pooling working on either side, the color pooling comes in and works with itself. So it looks like it's meant to be there. Like there's not even a seam there at all. Be sure to check out my new free tutorial for the Pooling Party Slouch Hat if you'd like to put this tip to good use.